Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. How are you? I'm Jessica Dow. I'm joined today by Audrey Gallo and Albrina Mendez, and we're going to be speaking to you. Our session is Beyond Corporate Walls, How ERG Leaders Advocate for Community and Political Change. But before we get started, Albrina, if you want to go to the next slide, we have some questions for you. So we're just curious what brought you here today and anything that you're curious about. And of course, in particularly as it pertains to this topic, you can feel free to drop it in the chat. And also just throughout our session, feel free to use the Q&A feature. And at the end of the presentation, we'll have time to respond to some of those questions. So what brought you here today? What are you curious about? Oh, awesome. New to Chesney. Great. You just want to see what the summit is about. Great. Thanks for joining our session as the first session. I know we're kicking off today. And we all have to decide what sessions we want to go to, but fortunately, everything's recorded, so we can go back and see the ones that we miss. Learn and grow as an ERG lead. Awesome. To learn about the greater impact that ERGs can have outside of their organizations. Yeah, definitely. And how they can influence change. Yeah, how D&I and ERG conversations have evolved. Want to understand how your ERGs can tie to community, not just within our walls. Absolutely. Would love to know more about how to balance advocacy and politics. Developing a better ERG system. Great. Awesome. Thank you for these insights. External impact is so important. It is, and that's what we're here to talk to you about today and talk with you about today. Okay, if you want to go to the next slide, this is going to be our agenda for today. So we'll introduce ourselves briefly, and then Audrey will kick us off talking about internal community advocacy and that model. Albrina will move forward from internal to external, where Albrina will talk about her experience. And then I will wrap us up talking about government political advocacy. And we also have some resources that we're going to share with you at the end and have some time, hopefully, for Q&A. So Audrey, if you want to go first.
Yes, thanks, Jessica, and really excited to see everyone here. Hi, my name is Audrey Gallo. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I've spent the majority of my professional career in social justice and DEI, both on the corporate and nonprofit side. So I'm currently an equity and inclusion director for a nonprofit called Nature Bridge, and I also serve as a board member for an organization called Tequeria, which is the largest global community of Latina in tech. And I also am a DEI consultant as well. So I help organizations who want to create equitable workplaces through my business, AG Voice. So I'm really glad to be here and share the stage with Albrina and Jessica. I'll pass it to Albrina.
Thank you, Audrey. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being in community with us today. I'm Albrina Mendez, currently based in Brooklyn, New York, and I am a community growth and content marketing consultant. Currently working with a few nonprofits. Prior to that, I sat on General Assembly's ERG leadership team for about 4.5 years. We'll get into that later. But yeah, it's a bit about me, and I'll pass it to Jess.
Thank you. I'm Jessica Dow, pronouns she, her. I'm based in the Philadelphia area. And I am currently a senior career coach at General Assembly, and I'm also serving as a co-lead for our disability impacted ERG. And I am a Lyme disease advocate, which I'm going to be focusing on in today's presentation.
All right, so I'm going to be kicking us off, starting with internal community advocacy. You can go to the next slide, Albrina. So you'll see this image with the 3 circles recurring when each of us kind of start our sections. So I will be starting with internal, meaning how you can lead advocacy efforts internally within your company or organization. And just to give you kind of some further background on me, I've spent time sort of in advocacy in both internal, external, and in government. So just to kind of give you a sense that your journey may like twist and turn, and you might be sort of involved in some more than others at any given point. And based on what you all shared with our first couple of questions, it sounds like there is a variety of interests of whether you want to focus inside, external, etc. So next slide. So advocacy is really just speaking up on behalf of a cause or a need for a community. And so many of you may or may not see yourselves as advocates already, but you are. So if you are an ERG leader, ERG sponsor, even ERG member, there are some qualities and characteristics and skills that you're already building just by having that exposure to your ERGs and the work you're doing within your organization. Some of those qualities I'll name here for you just so that you can actually tie that together like, oh, I didn't even realize that about myself or what I've been working on. One is bridge building. So that's really critical because you're already kind of the middle point between the community that you represent in your ERG and other teams at your company, like leadership teams, or maybe you're working with marketing or creative or some other team at your company. You're already this bridge between those two groups. Champions of change. So whether you know it or not, you're already enacting the steps of change, whether you've asked for, hey, we need funding for this event we really want to do, or hey, here's an issue like our community always has, can we fix that? That's already those examples of change making that you're involved in already. Strategic influencers. So because of the kind of unique exposure you have to your ERG community, you can get buy-in from other groups on behalf of your community. So again, that might be, hey, marketing team, we want your help with social media, or we've got this great idea, we need your help to convert it into something, you know, special with us. So you're already kind of giving those ideas and creating that influence to change things or do things differently. Role modeling. So you're already role modeling a lot of the qualities of inclusion, either for your ERG or even your greater company. So you're already kind of seen as a person who has the skills and qualities to speak on behalf of a cause or a need. And then the last piece is data-driven, which if you want to add in the chat, how are you doing with your ERGs on data? That can be a sort of, for some of you, maybe a little bit of a steeper hill to climb. And I would just say, look for opportunities to find data, even if it's in surveys or feedback forms or, you know, conversations that you're having with your ERG community. You really want to be driven by data and outcomes in this work so that you know that you're making a difference as well. So if that's not something you're comfortable with, like keep working on that piece. All right, next. Thank you. So I wanted to walk through some questions that you can use within your ERG to start reflecting on how you can strengthen your advocacy work if that's something that you want to do. I'd encourage, if you do kind of an exercise, reflection exercise around the questions I'll share today, do it with your ERG executive sponsor and your leadership team so that you are all hearing those different perspectives and viewpoints from across your ERG leadership. So the first question is really about understanding what the specific challenges or opportunities are for your community. And you can do that in lots of different ways, like I said, surveys or feedback forms, or if your group isn't very large, you're just getting started, maybe it's just a membership discussion where you get a meeting together and you say, hey, we're going to talk about what we all need and what issues you're seeing. So it's important to just narrow down, okay, what does our community really need? Like, what's next for us? The next question is, how does our advocacy align with the broader company goals? So that's the buy-in influence piece where you need to make sure that as best as you can, you're aligning the community's needs towards the company's mission or some of their business goals, so that there's alignment and willingness to kind of get your advocacy further. The third question is the measurable impact. So again, this goes back to you want to be focused on measurable outcomes, so that you're not just kind of spinning your wheels and working on things just because it's important, but that you know you're working towards a goal, right? A change. So we want to change this policy at our company, or maybe we just want language changed on our website, or maybe there's more funding we need for programming we want to do. Those are all things you can measure, and that way you can see the progression. And then the last piece is about creating allyship and building coalition. So an important piece of advocacy work is that you can't do it alone, right? So part of that speaking out piece is that you need other people involved in that work. And so thinking about like, who would care about this as well? Who would work with us on this? Who else can we get involved, right? So knowing that even though you're doing work internally at your company, you still need sort of other forces, other groups that can help support you. All right, let's continue. Excellent. So I just want to give you a glimpse into what my journey has been in advocacy. So hence very multidimensional. It is not linear, at least it wasn't for me. So give yourself that grace of, you know, it's not going to be this like perfect trajectory. Like any good journey in life, it's about learning and like iterating the process and, you know, meeting people and being inspired by what others are doing and informing kind of your steps forward. And the other thing is I would just emphasize just continuously reflecting on like what matters to you. Why do you want to do this? You know, who else can I learn from or be inspired from? So at any kind of turning point within your advocacy work, just keep asking yourself that, because this work can be really taxing sometimes. And so just knowing what your, you know, kind of purpose and where your strengths are and the areas that you want to keep growing in, I think is important. So I will pass it along now as we look to the external advocacy piece with Aubrey.
Thank you, Audrey. Okay, so diving into external community advocacy for ERG leaders. A relaying theme you're going to hear from this segment is that mental health matters. And fun fact, today is World Mental Health Day. Okay, so a little bit about my background and, you know, what led me here today, co-leading this presentation with these amazing two women. I actually had started a career in law enforcement back in 2019, and then the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and it kind of forced me into a redirection, thinking about my values and how I want to show up in the world. Initially, I wanted to be a police officer for more representation when it comes to Black and Brown folks. And everything that happened in 2020 prior to that, right? The consistency in police brutality and racial injustice with George Floyd, you know, Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, the list goes on. But that kind of forced me to lean into advocacy work. And I accepted a role as a community manager with GA to help diversify the tech talent pipeline. And naturally, I joined General Assembly's Women in Black ERG. So leveraging your ERG position to drive change. For me, when I became an ERG leader, I took an oath to address workplace challenges, you know, impacting women and underrepresented groups. As ERG leaders, almost every worldly event affects how we show up for our community. For example, COVID-19. And even today with what's happening with Hurricane Milton, you know, like checking in on folks who live in Florida just to see if they're okay and having those resources when it comes to mental health. And I have a stat here just about the top factors affecting women's mental health. And it includes high workload, lack of recognition, and poor work-life balance. Another fun fact, a lot of ERG leaders, majority are women. So it's just interesting how when it comes to mental health advocacy, it's all about us leaning into just advocating for others and empowering the voices of others. And for me, what led me there was thinking about my values and whether my personal values align with my role as an ERG leader. So some questions that I had to ask myself was, are my initiatives fostering inclusivity? Am I amplifying the voices of underrepresented groups? How do I ensure my leadership reflects community needs? And what values drive my ERG work, right? So when I took that self-assessment, I kind of intertwined those values, and it helped me foster a stronger commitment to diversity and inclusion, to amplifying marginalized voices, and building safe and supportive spaces. And, as we evolve through this human experience, our values don't always stay the same. So it's good to always, self-reflect and lean into discovery as an ERG leader. So these are just some case studies from working with external community groups and kind of marrying those gaps and those goals when it comes to DEI work in your org. Unlocking Our Inner Magic Summit was a women's wellness summit that I worked with Seek Her Foundation. And when it comes to external partnerships, these folks are already doing the work. So it's good to find the thought leaders and the decision makers who already have the infrastructure that you want to bring into your org, and then collaborate together. Collaboration is key. And the impact here, as you can see, I dropped some testimonials. Folks were really just happy to feel seen and be in community with others who share the same challenges that we go through when it comes to mental health. And then the Power of Black Design, this was in collaboration with General Assembly's Black ERG and the Student Resource Group at GA. This was also an external event with internal folks that joined. And it was to build awareness around the lack of Black designers in the community. And this helped to drive societal change around design. And then an attendee actually wrote an article about how touched she was. This event happened during Black History Month. So when it comes to the strategic actions for ERG leaders, it's really crucial to collaborate with those advocacy organizations and also the leaders that are already doing the work to influence workplace policy. For me, it was on mental health and equity, but it's also good to figure out what it is for you when it comes to how you want to show up as an ERG leader and the impact you want to make on an external front. And then also leverage the ERG platforms that exist today, like Chesy, right? To amplify community voices and advocate for systemic changes. For me, at the time, it was in education and career opportunities. And at the moment, currently, I'm just leaning into helping more ERG leaders when it comes to having those mental health conversations at work based on women's mental health research. So just bringing those connections and collaborating together to source solutions, co-creating the solutions when it comes to women's mental health and in general workplace equity. And yeah, that's a little bit about advocacy when it comes to external front for ERG leaders. And I'm going to pass it to Jess.
Thank you. And I'm gonna shift the focus a little bit to external and in a larger scale as it pertains to political and government impact. And so a little bit about me as it pertains to this work. I acquired Lyme disease in 2020, although I wasn't diagnosed until 2021. And I think even for me, that's people with Lyme disease, that's a short time frame. There's some people who don't get diagnosed for years, which is part of why I got into this advocacy. I joined General Assembly's Disability Impact ERG in 2022, and I stepped into a leadership role to support and amplify voices as much as I could, and didn't realize kind of how that would foster my own desire to advocate even further beyond the walls of GA. And so as I felt motivated and encouraged to do this work, I continued to stay committed to creating a supportive space internally at GA and showing up regularly for our members, while also expanding my Lyme advocacy efforts externally. And actually, interestingly enough, I don't know that it would be exciting news, but one of our members was actually tested and formally got diagnosed with Lyme this past year. And I don't claim to take any full responsibility for that, but I do know that my advocacy made an impact on their decision to seek testing, and just knowing that it made a difference in one person's life was huge for me. Earlier this year in February, I participated in a congressional advocacy event through the Center for Lyme Action, and this was to raise awareness and drive change and seek funding. And I'll share some more about that in a moment. But just like Audrey and Albrina were sharing, my journey was not linear, and I use some of the same guiding questions and continue to use these questions as I move forward in my work. And so, questions like what matters to me, and for me right now, that's been a focus on disability advocacy and Lyme disease awareness, asking, how can I help? How can I participate? And that's been internally through, the disability impact of ERG, but also looking for opportunities externally and politically. And that's what I've been able to do. Impact is important to me. How can I take action towards the things that I care about and see the results of that work? So through increasing awareness and achieving critical changes in treatment and patient care and just overall greater community support, these are the things that drive me. And then, of course, how can I develop and progress this impact? And it's been by getting connected to groups where I can speak up and affect things in a larger way. Next slide. So just a little bit more about my specific government advocacy work and some data about Lyme in particular. There's about 500,000 people in the US each year that are getting Lyme disease. And in 2019, a group of dedicated advocates and Lyme disease foundations that were already doing great work decided to come together and form the Center for Lyme Action. I was fortunate to discover the Center for Lyme Action through a subscription that I was part of to LymeDisease.org, to their newsletter. So luckily they send a regular newsletter, and I found out about them and decided, what is this? How can I get involved? And I found out there was a way for me to get involved. And so I saw the power that they had. In 4 years. They were able to raise over $400 million in federal funding for Lyme and tick-borne disease research, diagnostics, and therapies. And so I was eager to get involved. So in 2024, I spoke alongside fellow advocates, and I spoke with local and state representatives in Congress to seek increased appropriations for the following year. And at this event, they call it the Lyme Fly-In event. It's a Zoom event, but close to 400 advocates showed up from 45 states. And as a result, the CDC, the NIH, and the FDA were instructed to review tick-borne disease content, develop new diagnostics, and report on alpha-gal and maternal fetal transmission. And an additional $157 million was approved for Lyme and tick-borne disease research and its initiatives in the House. And we're currently waiting for Senate approval before it can get signed into law. And I was so excited to see the work that they're doing firsthand, that moving forward. I will be serving as a co-lead for the Pennsylvania Appropriations Request Team, and I'm really excited to work on supporting those efforts, fundraising efforts, and engagement efforts for 2025. Next slide. So here's some things to consider, some questions you want to ask yourself if you're interested in getting involved politically. What groups can you join? What platforms are you using? Who are your local and state representatives? What's on the ballot, and how can you advocate? And so in terms of groups you can join, I just recommend, kind of like I did, I was just Googling and doing a ton of research initially when I got sick and trying to find groups to connect with and resources. So I signed up for some newsletters with some respected and reputable organizations. joined Facebook groups. I started following people on Instagram, you know, follow these influencers, connect, use social media platforms, LinkedIn even. We just, through my influence, maybe the career coach in me, I said, could we get a LinkedIn page for our Center for Lyme Action? So now we have that, but just being connected to people organically, you can find out about these opportunities and get involved on a grassroots level. And then see about opportunities to become members of either national or local groups and chapters. Sometimes it's easier to have a greater impact when you're in these local groups, and you can scale that. But use your leadership skills and your experience. You know, you're currently advocating, you're doing this work, like Audrey was saying, you know, use that to your advantage because you have the skills that it takes to make this impact, and influence change, internally, externally, and of course, politically. Another way to do this is through researching, you know, candidates who are running for office and understanding what their interests are. And of course, now more than ever, understanding the importance of voting in local, state, and national elections. And part of the resources that we'll be providing, I include some links to some of these sites where you can get connected to this data about, you know, who's on the ballot and who are your, you know, congressional members that you can reach out to and be in touch with. So, yeah, so I encourage you to do this work. I think, you know, you have a lot to offer, and I hope this will inspire you to move beyond the walls. And that's all I have for this part of it, but we'll move on to the resources part, which we've been touching on, and I'll let Abrina take over.
Thank you, Jess. So yeah, we've gathered tools and resources for you that should be linked in the chat or post summit. But yeah, feel free to dive in and connect with us on anything that you see on the list. And time for Q&A. So if you haven't already, feel free to drop any questions that might have come up for you throughout the conversation. We've dropped some examples here to just help inspire anything that comes to mind. I see we have some in the chat. Okay, so the first one we have, how do you balance addressing social issues within the parameters of your company's code of conduct? For example, respecting everyone's beliefs/opinions. Anyone want to take this one?
I can start and then y'all can jump in. All right, so I saw this also in another comment in the chat around like balancing political kind of taboo political themes or issues in the workplace. So just to zoom out for a little bit, that is something you have to be very aware of in terms of the potential risks for your own job and sort of your career. So that's a real part of this if you're moving forward. There's some issues that are going to be sort of less taboo or less filled with risk or tension versus others. So it's really important that you understand your company's code of conduct and what is expected of you. Every company or organization is different in terms of not just what sort of the written sort of employee handbook expectations are, but also just culturally. Like, is it culturally okay to say certain things, let's say on your company's Slack channel or wherever you sort of congregate as a staff, right? So just really knowing that before you know, if your gut is kind of telling you like, this may not be quite right, you want to do some checking with people before you start to just sort of like broadcast your advocacy sort of at 100% volume. And there are people probably around you that you can check in with. So if you have a trusted supervisor or manager, you can say, hey, this is something that matters to me. I want to do more about it. Do you think this is something I could be sharing with people, right? If you're an ERG leader, ask your ERG sponsor. right? They have a different perspective than you on the company. And so they can offer guidance and advice before you sort of step into something that you have kind of already an intuition that might be a little bit more tricky. So I know I addressed kind of one level, so more perspectives on that, but I just wanted to share that piece of just like, make sure you take care of yourself before you start taking care of others.
I love that, Audrey, and plus one to everything you said. To add to that, also just tailoring messaging to specific groups that may be under the umbrella of this societal issue that comes to play. Obviously, not everyone may resonate or feel like it reflects on them, but kind of working with ERG leaders to tailor messaging around the folks and the communities that you serve would be something that's beneficial as well. And we have another question here. As a disabled person, how do you parse your energy for advocacy? I'm going to pass this one to Jess.
It's a great question. And you know, it's one of the things that I think every day you have to wake up and consider how you're spending your energy to do the work that you need to do in your job, in your life, but of course, in this important work that we're doing as ERG leaders and advocates. And one of the things that has been really important for me has been not trying to go it alone. And so like, even for our ERGs, like I co-lead this ERG. And so even with my colleague who I've grown very close to, who is my co-lead, I'm able to, you know, take turns more or less, you know, when we can't both show up, because they're also dealing with their own things that challenges and things that they have to face. And so we'll take turns and we kind of will be the shoulder that the other person needs at times when we need that break. But when we're feeling that we have the energy, that's when we do the work. And then when we take the break, we say, I need the break, you know, or I can't show up for this today for whatever reason it is. And I think the fact that we are consistent in communication with not just each other, but with all of our members is critical, because even on the days when we're struggling, we're still there. And fortunately, we're very active and engaged through our Slack channels, and we make a point to connect on a one-on-one level with our membership too. And then externally, I'm, for better or for worse, I'm involved with a group and a community of people who are suffering with all kinds of complaints and issues and challenges on a regular basis through this illness. And so, some folks have it a lot worse than me. And I'm inspired by them, but I think, it is important still to remember that your challenges are yours and you give yourself grace, and you have to own that when you need a moment. You have to speak up for yourself, because like Audrey just said, like you can't do this work if you're not taking care of yourself first. And that is priority. So I think just speaking up for that and being able to say, I need this time, has been really helpful. And it's brought humanity to these issues and helped, I think, others feel seen.
Couldn't find the unmute button, but thank you, Jess, for that. And then we have another question. How do you balance having a safe space for people to speak their mind while also encouraging people to find community in ERGs regarding the political unreset in the world? I'm happy to take a stab at this first. I think it's first acknowledging that at the end of the day, we are all humans and we cope in different ways. We take information in different ways. So kind of like having options for folks when it comes to coming together in community, whether that's sharing resources or hopping on a Zoom call just to talk and listen to each other. I think that is very beneficial when it comes to carving out the safe space and having balance for just feeling those emotions, rather than trying to kind of hide it or show that it doesn't exist, because we are ERG leaders. At the end of the day, it's all about us relating to each other, hence why we're doing this work in service of others. So just acknowledging that we're humans first, and then creating the options for folks to choose what best would serve them in the moment of time with whatever may be going on in the world and at work. Audrey and Jess, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I can add some more. Definitely appreciate your perspective on that, Albrina. I mean, I also want to just like go back to part of just the like understanding your organization, I think is also part of just those skill sets that you all have as ERG leaders and ERG members, is just really trying to understand like culturally, like what has worked really well within your organization that you might be able to apply to creating that safe space or that balance. So, you know, when I was serving as an ERG leader, like I just looked for inspiration. Like I reached out on LinkedIn to other ERG leaders. I reached out to ERG leaders within the company I was in, like my fellow panelists here, right? So I think it's important to like be inspired, gather ideas, try to find like experiment a little, right? Like to try and find what is going to be like the best fit for that. So I think sometimes what happens in organizations is that you try something and it's not the right fit, and it quite frankly goes really poorly. And then it sort of creates this rigidity to try something else, right? Because it's like, oh God, that's good. You know, what if that happens? But the goal is really to get to a place where you can successfully, safely create those balance spaces that you're looking for. And it's gonna, like anything, it's gonna take some trial and error to get there. So I think just like the encouragement of try to, you know, do the best you can to try the things that will work for the particular context and people that you have at your organization. There's no one size fits all for ERGs. It's really about the context of your company, your ERG, the people that are on staff or employed there at that time. So you're doing a lot of active listening, a lot of interpretation about what the community group that you're working with needs and adapting to that.
We do have a follow-up question from that initial one. How can safe spaces truly be safe? How can we avoid any form of censoring as ERG leaders?
I can start that off and then pass it along. I think again, it's sort of, you know, you are playing by and staying within the guidelines of what your company sort of setting as its parameters and expectations of what can and can't be done in that space. So I think it is important to recognize that. And if those spaces, for example, when I was an ERG leader, you know, members would come to me and say, you know, I want this, like we need a space that can do this thing, or we'd like to talk about this. And it was really important in my role as an ERG leader to ask the organization, right? Ask the company, is that a space that you can support us hosting? And if the answer is no, or it's an even sort of, I don't know, right? It's probably not something you want to do because it's going to harm your community, right? The one that you're probably trying to protect. So you really need like a resounding, yes, you can do that in order to move forward. And so I think that having that understanding of not, sometimes it's not possible. Like sometimes you have to say, no, that's not the space that we actually can create, and encourage your membership to actually find those spaces outside of your organization's sort of walls. And I think that can be hard or difficult moment for ERG leaders, because as advocates, we want to say yes to everything. We're like, yes, you can have this. Yes, you can, we want to give. But it's also making sure that you're doing right by your community, and, making sure that all of the pieces are there for those safe spaces.
Thank you, Audrey. We do have 1 minute left. So I don't believe we can take the last question, but we're happy to answer in a follow-up post-summit. Thank you all for just being here with us today and sharing space with us and being in community with us. You all are leading and doing amazing work. And shout out to you for choosing this knowledge session to be able to apply your impact as you leave here today. I'll pass it to Audrey and Jess for any last words.
Thank you so much. Look forward to connecting with you more beyond this.
Same. Thank you. And please connect and let's keep the conversation going. Thanks, Albrina and Jess.